All right, the reviews are in, and VinFast has failed based on multiple reviewers looking at their products now that VinFast has opened up, allowing reviewers to actually look at their products. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John, and I have been a proponent of VinFast for probably about 2 years now. I'm a big supporter of this company coming here to America. I think there's only a couple of moments in our life where we're going to see a new company come to America and possibly succeed. I'm a little too young to remember the Toyotas, Datsuns, and Hondas of the 60s and the 70s, but I remember them in the 80s becoming pretty dominant for their well-constructed cars with great efficiency and strong reliability. But I also remember Yugo and Hyundai. And I've said for a long time, with VinFast, we're looking at Hyundai or Yugo. Either crappy cars that fail or crappy cars that a company backs and consistently improves, expands their warranty. I think VinFast falls into that second category. I really, really do. I've been a big proponent of them, but I've said some negative things on this channel, and I'm going to bring that up at the end because I think it's impacting my ability to review their products. So a quick history here. If you haven't been here to my channel for a long time, I'm a proponent of VinFast, but VinFast is part of Vingroup. Vingroup is from Vietnam. They own technology, healthcare, grocery stores, a lot of other products like that. The owner of Vingroup is the richest man in Vietnam, and they decided in 2017 to enter the automotive world. Now they took some old BMWs and some old GMs, they restyled them, they started offering them for the domestic market, and then they said, we're going to move to EVs. They partnered with Pininfarina for styling, and they said they were going to come to America, Canada, and parts of the European Union. And as a matter of fact, being a proponent of them, they're building a factory not 2.5, 3 hours away from me here in North Carolina. So I am really supporting them and want them to succeed. And another thing that's really surprised me is they move very, very quickly. There was a great quote. See, about a year ago, they took a bunch of influencers in a couple of different trips and sent them to Vietnam to be hosted by Vingroup, to see their resorts, to see the culture, to be treated well, see the factory, and see the products. And one of the quotes was, there was an engineer, as I recall, he had worked for other auto manufacturers, and that he was surprised at how fast VinFast actually moved. That if they identified a problem, they submitted it, and by the next day, it was fixed. Whereas with more traditional manufacturers, it could be sent up to a group or to a committee to decide for weeks later for the fix to actually come down. So VinFast was moving very quickly. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I do see VinFast as being the next big thing. I really, really do. And I support them for that. But they've never reached out to me to be part of their introduction. And honestly, it's kind of hurt my feelings. But what they have done is, now that they've released products, they finally invited a select group to come through and test their products. Now, these should be curated products, the best of the best, perfect in every way, and they weren't. So if we look back, part of my criticism has been they've been rushing so fast, they're releasing products that aren't quite ready, and they're making it harder on themselves. When you look at Honda, Datsun, Toyota, Hyundai, they released cheap cars and then consistently improve them over time. But that's not what VinFast is doing. VinFast is releasing a car, and they truly want to compete in the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Volkswagen ID4, Tesla offerings. They want to compete in that $50,000 range from the get-go. And they plan on being premium by offering a lot of driver aids. That's very ambitious, especially with a Vietnamese manufacturer that doesn't truly know the US market. And they've stumbled along the way. Now, the first thing is the early adopters of the VF8, which is the middle of the line. So you've got the VF8. I say it's about the size of the Mustang Mach-E. There's a VF9 above it, which is much, much bigger, and then they're going to have two other ones below that in the American market, and another one that's going to be smaller that's available in the European market. But that VF8, they were promising 250, 260 miles of range, but when they finally sent their first selection of cars here to the United States, it had about 205 miles of range for the Eco model. And they identified it as being a chemistry issue, and they reduced the lease for early adopters. But it's still, from a price and range standpoint, not competitive at all. Now, they've improved that. They've actually changed their battery supplier to CATL, so the next groups that are coming here are going to be about 260 miles of range, a little bit more. Power is going to remain about the same. So they're getting more competitive, but still not at the top and not a bargain relative to other manufacturers out there. They've made their path as difficult as possible. And part of that is that they had planned on a battery subscription program, and they couldn't really figure it out. It was confusing. They ended up dropping it. As a matter of fact, I've read that they're not going to sell cars. They're only going to lease them moving forward. That allows them to kind of hide the price, as a matter of fact. We'll talk more about that at the end, and we'll talk more about at the end about how I have been kind of cut out of all of this in my experience. But what they did do is they did reach out to several select reviewers and invite them to look at the cars. And it's very interesting. I'm going to provide links to all of them below. But it's very interesting because one of them will say my passenger got car sick, and then I'll find another review where it's like I was the passenger getting car sick, things like that. And here is the results. Road and Track said the VF8 is unacceptable. Green Car Report said don't buy. Ars Technica, shaky but promising. Motor Trend, return to sender inside EVs, yikes. And Electrek, room for improvement. And I think that this is very telling that they've invited reviewers that they thought were going to be favorable, and only two of them were remotely forgiving of the problems they faced. And the problems varied from electrical issues to more mechanical ride and handling issues. A brief summary is that right now in California, they have 14 locations, and they're going to open another 14 before the end of 2023. Now, they promised bringing over what became these city models, these lower range models, at the end of 2022. And what has surprised me is they've gotten them out. And anecdotal evidence says that the retail locations are empty. So these vehicles are going somewhere, but we've heard nothing from it. We've heard no reviews. You would think that somebody, some YouTuber, some reviewer in the California market would find a owner and say, please let me review it. But we've heard nothing for 5 months. But finally, VinFast allowed reviewers to start seeing it. And, well, it's been pretty brutal. That with less than 1,000 miles, I'm combining all of these reviews into one. With less than 1,000 miles, the interiors are already showing wear. That the seat adjustment actually broke off in their hand from one of them. The door panels flex when you try to close them. The seats are stiff, overstuffed, and flat, and the interior is, this is critical, like a 20-year-old General Motors car. Panel gaps and the quality of the materials. The driver assistance doesn't necessarily work. The blind spot, the emergency braking, the traffic signal recognition, the lane control, it may work. You can set it, but when you turn off the car and turn it back on, it all resets to the standard. And that means that the car chimes at you endlessly. One reviewer notes that the turn signal doesn't work consistently. Voice control is terrible. The car may understand you and display your exact words and then say it doesn't understand, but perhaps worse, it understands and then there's a delay of 20 seconds until it does. That doesn't sound terrible, but let me give you an example. Hey VinFast, roll down the driver window. And now it does. That 20 seconds feels like an eternity in the real world. The adaptive cruise and lane centering work, but reminders to keep your hands on the wheel are inconsistent at best. And one of the reviewers noted that it warned the driver to put their hands on the wheel when they already had their hands on the wheel and the steering assistance was off. Navigation was unfunctional. Blind spot functionality was essentially useless, and you can't listen to the radio or turn on the HVAC fan until you're buckled in and you have your foot on the brake. So there is no waiting for your kids while they play t-ball unless you buckle in and put your foot on the brake. Massive oversight. Now, some more ergonomic stuff was the gear selector is a column of push buttons, which I think looks pretty cool, but it doesn't actually save any space over putting in a regular gear shifter. There's no gauge cluster, just a HUD. But that doesn't work if you wear polarized glasses. Numerous reviewers said something about that. The brake pedal has a lot of play, and then there's no real certainty what actually happens next, and the same with steering. There's absolutely no feel. You're not sure how much input will yield how much results, and in sport mode, one reviewer called it borderline uncontrollable. The good news is that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are included, and the interface is more responsive than an ID4. But one of the more interesting ones is the HVAC. Apparently 80 is the miracle number. Below that, it blows freezing, and above that, it blows hot. And there's nothing in between, even if you set the automatic climate control to something else. Also, the seat heater was dangerously hot and would not turn off on its own or have a timer, so it was, well, dangerous. All of those could be addressed largely through over-the-air updates. These are computer issues. These are programming issues. And I see VinFast being able to address all of those, but they shouldn't release a car with all of those issues. They're still working on it, but some of the things were much more substantial and would be fixed at the factory. The ride and handling was not up to snuff. Multiple reviewers talked about having actual issues with the ride of terms of seasickness. They had to pull off the side of the road to recover from how wobbly the car was and the poor motion control. It rolled, it listed, it squeaked, it rattled, it whistled. They were literally seasick, and two different reviewers actually talked about this. While visibility is good, which is important since the camera quality is apparently from the 90s and inconsistent in how much it actually worked. My favorite quote was that the tire and road noise would make an old Honda blush. There is no one-pedal driving, and setting it for the most regenerative braking would be canceled when you stopped the car and then restarted it. One car pulled hard to the right, one rolled backwards on a hill, and sometimes turn signals wouldn't work at all, while everybody complained about the endless warning signals from the car. Simple adjustments like side view mirrors were buried in non-intuitive and unlabeled menus on the touchscreen, and voice control was somewhat sketchy. I love this one where it would actually read what you said correctly, but then not do it, and other ones where it would do it, but after that delay we talked about earlier. Now, the actual technology of it, the charging, Well, it charges at 160 kilowatts, which isn't bad, but current Hyundais reach over 200, which means it's behind the pack right now. The warranty is good with a 10-year unlimited warranty for the battery and 24/7 roadside assistance and a 10-year 125,000-mile warranty for the car. They've removed the battery leasing, and they're now not selling VF8s. They're only leasing it. While they do talk about the price, they really focus on the leasing price, which means they're buying down the rate to encourage you to buy it. Now, this is fantastic. They are offering something around a $400 lease rate. That's a 10,000 miles a year, but it does have a higher down payment than others, and their competitors are in that $500, $600 range. It seems like a really, really good deal, except of how much is actually wrong. Future models will have those CATL batteries with 264 miles of range for Eco and 243 for the Plus version, but it still doesn't seem like a deal. The best part of all of this is that they had a VF9, which is their next size up, a very large EV, and eagle-eyed reviewers noticed that it was actually being held up by jack stands because they, from Vinfast, said that the rear air suspension had failed. This is a brand spanking new car that hasn't even hit the market yet. So the end result is, well, if you read all of these, they range from could use improvement to not ready for prime time and shouldn't be released. And I tend to agree with those latter views. Multiple of these were talking about the fact that in this modern age, there is no truly bad cars, that even the worst cars are still pretty darn good. But Vinfast VF8 changes that. This is apparently truly a bad car, and it shouldn't be released. It's unbelievable. One quote said something like they've driven pre-production concept cars that were more finished than this VF8. And here it is. You can go get this right now in the market. A lot of these can be handled through over-the-air updates, turn signals, and things like that. They can fix this. It's electronic, but the actual ride and handling, spring, and suspension settings, those are not minor things. Those have to be fixed at the factory. And it's shocking that they've gotten to this point. Vinfast needs to get their stuff fixed, and they need to get it fixed quickly. But what's really surprising to me is how few people they've involved in actually reviewing these cars. I think that's very telling. They kind of cherry-picked people who were more favorable to it, or more electric, more favorable to electric vehicles. I've been a proponent for a couple of years, and in all honesty, I've been contacted by Vinfast a few times about taking a look at their products. Those groups of influencers that were sent to Vietnam and treated to multiple days of luxury accommodations, see the factory, and have a chance to do a quick little ride and drive in the vehicles. Well, I was asked about that. I was contacted about that, but a offer never actually came through for me. Later, I was contacted about going to the New York International Auto Show, where they were going to have a display and a quick ride and drive, but nothing ever came out of it. And I truly believe that part of that is because I started to write negative things about their decisions and how they're making their lives more difficult the way they're approaching the market. This is influenced also, it's reinforced by Jalopnik. Now, they're a pretty darn big right, car website, but they were invited to Vietnam, and their article on it was very negative about basically a dog and pony show without any substance. So when this drive, the VF8, came along, Jalopnik was not invited. So here I am. I'm a reviewer. I am positive about VF8. I want to support them. I live in North Carolina. Their company, their manufacturing facility is going to be built 2.5 to 3 hours away from me. I want to believe. I want to test these. I want to see how they're going to stand up. But because I've said negative things like they shouldn't be diving into the luxury end. They shouldn't be diving into the $50,000 end. They should be looking at the lower end and building up from there while they learn the market. I'm not getting invited. I really wish VinFast the best, but right now, all the reviews are saying their product is not ready for prime time. It's not got the body roll, the handling, the feel, and the infotainment interaction, the driver's aids, to be competitive with the lowest of the market, much less the premium of the market. All of this can be fixed, and all of this can be fixed relatively quickly. I suspect the next year will be very important to VinFast while they get that plant built and eventually online. I don't think they're down. I don't think they're out. But dang, I'm surprised at how bad these reviews were when almost every car out there is still pretty good, even not perfect. This one is brutal, but I still open myself up. If VinFast wants to contact me and wants me to review it, I will always be honest, but acknowledge I kind of want these guys to succeed because they're just building over there. Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for being here.